Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Hello. Hi. Wow, this is great. I have not had that experience in a while. We have been working in this environment. We've been working in Zoom and having our conferences in Zoom. And that's me in the middle right there, just going nuts because I want to actually be in front of real people again. Thank you for actually coming to my talk, because if it would have been empty, I would have felt like I was still in this box, and I'm glad I'm not. A little bit about myself. Yes, I've been in the industry a long period of time. If you notice the gray, that's part of what happens when you become, I think the word seasoned, I think is what they say, which is kind of a weird thing to say about people. But a couple of my hobbies that I have, because I like to share some other things about me just other than just being, I grew up as an engineer. My father was an engineer, a mechanical engineer. I was an electrical engineer, systems engineer for about 15 or 16 years. And I still like to use my engineering skills. If you notice in the lower corner there, I did write a book on test. So I do have a background in test and test engineering. So I do relate that your job sometimes is a very lonely one. Is that true? Yes? Let's just wake us up real quick. Hold on real quick. One, here we go. One. Back of the room, now. You're not doing it. One more time. Okay. So some of my hobbies are, I actually bought a boat that was built in the 1960s, and I totally rebuilt it. It's made out of wood. It's mahogany hull. Its name is Marmalade Skies, if you guys are familiar with the Beatles song where they talk about a boat on the river. And I've been working on that during COVID, and this is what it looks like today. I also build models. I have 4 3D printers at home. I have 2 laser cutters. I have a whole set of prototyping equipment that I use to just build things. I typically build props. And I also do my day job, which is actually working with people with business agility. So how many here think Agile is a dirty word? Raise your hand. Okay, one honest person in the room. Anyone else? Okay, got a little bit iffies on there. You can blame me a little bit because I've been working in Agile since 2003. And actually, I've been working to help to transform organizations to an Agile way of work. I want to go ahead and give a disclaimer right off the get-go. Anyone from Spotify here? Any lawyers from Spotify that are here? Got to know whether or not they're here in the room. But I just want to say this. I love Spotify as a company. I have a number of friends that I work with that work at Spotify. This in by no means, way, shape, or form is to degrade them as a company. But I do want to go point out some things that I've seen over the years. But I just want to make sure first everyone understands that, you know what, I love them as a company. And this is by no means trying to go throw them under the bus, because there's a lot of people who go off and do this. When we come to conferences, we tend to talk about our Agile transformations or our test, and we stand in front of the groups of people as presenters, and we tell you the whole story, all big and proud standing there. But in reality we're not really sharing the full contrast. There's more to this than just, embellishing all of the positives. There's also the dark side of things. And the dark side in the case of Agile adoptions is that more than 50% of them fail. And they fail not gracefully, they fail not so well. And when they do not so well, then it actually could potentially cause harm to humans. And I very much don't want to cause harm to humans. So I am going to do my best to give you the full contrast up here on stage. And that's the obligation that I'm going to have with you, the contract that we're going to have. I'm going to tell you both the good and the bad that I've seen within the Agile space. And specifically, if we think of Spotify, and I saw this talk live, they came out with something called the Spotify model in 2012. How many people have heard of that? Yes. How many of you are trying to implement the Spotify model? We have a few. What was interesting about this is if you went to Anders' first talk on this, and Hendrik, They both said something very profound in the very beginning, which is don't copy us. What we're about to tell you is we don't want you to think that we have a framework. This isn't something that you're going to get a certification in. This is something we're going to talk about our internal experiences of laying out our organization in a particular way, which are done with tribes, as well as these guilds and other things that they had set up in order for them to go deliver their product. And a lot of companies looked at Spotify and said, hey, I want to be like them. And what I found with that kind of a problem in that statement is that a lot of you are not Spotify. You're neither shipping an MP3 download or an app. You might be doing semiconductors, or you might be doing some other type of product that has nothing to do with what they were, especially what they were at the time, because context matters in a lot of regards. They come up and say, do not copy, but yet back in 2020, there was a report that came out that said that 5% of the people were following it. Standing up on stage and say, whatever you do, do not implement this, must sell, man. Whatever you do not implement what I'm about to talk about. Because I think that's part of the psychological portion of this, is that when 5% start to go off on a journey to go implement this, they sometimes don't realize where Spotify was at this time. Spotify in 2011 was 311 people. At the time, I was working for Intel Corporation, and we were doing an Agile adoption that was upwards about 50,000 people. Total number of people in my company was 120,000 people. I would never think of taking a methodology that was written for 300 people and try to scale it. So context matters in this regards, because what they were talking about was something, as you look, Spotify is well over 6,000 people today. And I have a little secret I'll share a little bit further in the presentation about what came out from going from 300 people to 6,000 for them as a company. When you adopt any methodology, there's a socio-technical interrelationship with it. It's not just about the task that you do, the task of delivering work. There's also a couple of other components that are around it. One of it is the people. My transformation efforts mostly focus on people, because we're shifting behaviors and how people will approach work and how they get things done. But we also have the organizational structures, and we also have the technology and the foundations of the technology that are there as well. And so when you're addressing and taking a methodology somebody else has applied, thinking that you can just directly plop it into your organization and it working, what you'll find is that you're going to get a huge, what is known as a human variance, or a team variance. Steve McConnell, who wrote Clean Code, I believe is the book he wrote, Steve McConnell did a whole survey of looking at that you take the same method, which looks like the same group of people, implement it across 5 to 10 different teams, you get anywhere from a 25 to 50% performance variance with the same methodology. So the human, when you drop different humans into it, you're going to get different results. So their advice of saying not copying it was actually a valid one. Because as you copy methods, they simply just may not come out exactly as you expected it. This guy's probably a good Elvis impersonator as far as, don't be cruel and all that stuff. But still, the thing that just to point out of when you're copying methods, and this is not just the Spotify model. This is Scrum. This is SAFe. This is LESS. Scrum at scale. I can keep going down the different methods that are there. You're going to get different results than some companies do. And believe it or not, there's nothing wrong with you. It just means that there is that human variance that's in the system. You do, though, have the risk of becoming a cargo cult, though. And has anyone heard of a cargo cult before? We have a few people. A cargo cult is, just to set the stage, back in during the World War II, the supply chains by both the Japanese army and the US army, the Allied army, they used to set up these restocking and refueling stations on these islands that were in the Pacific. And what they did is that in order to get the local tribes people, they got them to enlist their help with this work, and in exchange, they gave them cargo. Hence the name cargo cult comes into existence, because what had happened is that after the war ended, the planes disappeared. The planes weren't landing anymore. They could see them flying over. And then the local tribes were trying to decide, how do I get those planes to land? Well, they started to think about what they saw the people doing, the troops. Oh, if we just march, when the planes are flying over, the planes will look down and they'll go, oh, look, there's some military people down there, we should land. Well, that didn't work. So then they started looking at, well, let's build control towers or fake aircraft and put them on fake runways. And surely a plane will fly over and look and say, oh, there's a plane down there and a control tower. And they would actually put bamboo to their head and pretend like they were talking in, like they saw the troops doing. But never did the planes land. They couldn't connect the fact that the rituals that were being performed had nothing to do with the fact of how cargo got down to the island itself. They didn't really fully understand what was going on. And that's why context matters in this case, because if you look at the overall where Spotify originally started, their root culture in where they grew up was very teamwork oriented. There was a small power distance between what the top person made and the individuals who were developing the software. There was not that big of a power differential. And so by not understanding all those things, that suddenly when you go to, say, a Western culture that isn't used to working as teams, they work more as individuals, but then they tend to come in and they would do what? They would think that, okay, well, is my CEO ever going to come even into the room with us? The power differential between the CEO and the next person down to the lowest one in the organization is pretty wide. And so a lot of what made the guilds work was the fact that people were very willing to get together and work as guilds. They had a low entry condition with that because of just the foundational and the culture itself. And I think that's kind of scary in some regards. It's not as scary as this. This is a little bit scarier, right? You know what's even scarier? I've used this shtick on other talks a long time ago, and I always end it's scary here on this picture. There's a scarier thing after this, and that's this. This was from a Spotify Agile coach who basically said in public, we weren't doing it. And in fact, we never were. Let that sit in for a second. The people who are currently following the Spotify model, who heard the talks, heard the presentation, looked at the person up on stage and said, wow, we should try that as well. And granted, this could be just fighting in front of the kids, right? There could be some internal things. I don't know how true the statement is versus did they do it in 2009, and by the time they reached 2011, it was gone. I just take for this at its face value when an Agile coach says, we don't follow it, and we never did. That's a hard reckoning right there. I think that does get back into what I opened with, which is if I come up and talk about a method, and speakers, put your hands up in the room. Please, speakers, give full disclosure on the other half of it. I know you guys want to say it's all exciting and good and all of that, but please, if there was never a kitty in the picture, please don't put the kitty in there as well. Just, you got to be really careful with this. Scaled Agile. This is another thing that right now, just around the industry today. It will fix everything. Just all you have to do is just implement our method and our methodology, and guess what? It's one size fits all. It fits on one slide. It's so cool. I have yet to find a scaled framework in our industry that has been fully implemented. And I have been looking. I typically go off and do, as an international speaker, I do a lot of talks. And I visit a lot of companies. And every time when we get, to a certain level on those scaled frameworks, they go, "Oh, we don't do that. Oh, do you do the portfolio layer in SAFe?" And they'll say, "No, we don't do that." Or in Scrum. Scrum is relatively easy overall. I could teach it to you in 10 minutes. It'll take you 2 years to get good at it, but still, it's relatively easy to teach. And every time somebody says, "Scrum doesn't work for me," and I go, "Oh, what does your retrospective say?" And they say, "We don't do a retrospective." "Oh, what do you learn in your daily stand-up?" "Oh, we do those once a week, if everyone shows up." Or, "Do you do any of your own release planning?" And you just keep going down the rituals itself, and you discover that they're not really practicing Scrum. If you're not doing, the simple rituals that are outlined in the Scrum training, please stop calling it Scrum, and please stop throwing Scrum under the bus and saying, "Well, Scrum doesn't work." Well, make a contract with you. Try Scrum first, and then you could say that afterwards of whether or not it fits for your particular business. A lot of this just comes down to snake oil in some regards. And snake oil salesmen in the United States, where this came from, was there used to be these traveling people who would go around and they would sell you a tonic. It's a great tonic. "Oh, you got a problem with your knee, son? Well, you just have to use some of good old Ray's Scaled Agile Framework. Just take that." I feel agility going through my system right now at such a level. It's amazing. We have to be really careful with these things that we get exposure to. We have to really seek to understand them. And seeking to understand, and you're probably wondering right now, just kind of shrugging and saying, "Ray, you just threw everything that I do in Agile under the bus. Why are you doing that to me?" Well, there's an important thing that you are doing with it that I want to point out. And it's something that I've done over the last 15 years of my Agile journey. It's actually been longer. Started Agile in 2003. And debatably, I was doing it before that, before they actually called it Agile itself. Before they put the marketing engine behind it. But there is some things that the Spotify model is good for. One of it is, you guys invite me up here for a talk to talk about it. That's number one. Number two is, we're talking about it. We're having a conversation about it. And how it can potentially help us. Because one of the struggles that we have in most teams today, and I can tell you from both my Intel experience, my consulting experience, and right now I work for Dell Technology. By the way, the views expressed are those of myself and not of my prior nor my current employer. Is there any Dell lawyers in the office? Any Intel lawyers? I actually had an Intel lawyer following me around for a couple of years when I was doing a presentation, wanted to know what I was talking about, which I thought was kind of funny. We became friends. It was cool. But what happens is that when you do work in especially older companies, if you look in your toolkit and all you have is hammers, you tend to treat things all the same way. And that is, everything looks like a nail. You've heard this analogy before. And so being exposed to other tools, even if you don't know how they work, and looking at them actually helps you as an organization to actually start to understand what it is I need to do in my competency in order to become a chef. Did you guys know you're chefs? Did you know that? What do chefs do? Any examples of what a chef would do? They cook, yeah, but they don't just cook. What do? They what? They organize. They organize kitchens, they do that. But you know what? You put a set of ingredients in front of a chef, and what do? They do magic. They do absolutely. You could have the ingredients that you would have in your refrigerator, and you'd go, there's nothing to make. Bring a qualified chef in. They get out their trusty toolkit of stuff that they've learned over the period of time. In the case, they have a much larger toolkit of things that they can go pull from. I've collected a whole bunch of different things in my Agile. That's not even a full toolbox. As you know, Agile itself has a whole bunch of different things I can go learn. As a matter of fact, there's one whole row off the side there that looks distinctly like testing, if I'm not mistaken, which is good stuff. I love test-driven development. I've done it. Do you know what? It's hard. What? I got to write the test first? You know, definitions of done. How do I go off and do good unit testing? How do I build quality into my code? Those are all things that, as you look at it, there's no two code fragments that are the same. As even a programmer, I have to be a chef. I've got a problem statement in front of me, and I'm working to go remix the environment so that I can have a high degree of experimentation in how I approach it. There is nothing wrong with a cook, but typically a cook is by the book. They have a recipe, they follow the recipe. I buy a Big Mac here, and the Big Mac tastes exactly the same as it is in the United States. Those are cooks. They are just cooking the recipe that was built for them. The chefs that I'm looking for, all of you, are the ones who are looking at the tasty ingredients and rolling together something more beautiful than what we thought was possible. One of the challenges I have for everyone in this room is, why are we still just talking about test-driven development? Does anyone know when it was invented? Any idea? Back in the 80s? Could be in the 80s. The music was better in the 80s, right? My hair was longer in the 80s, I know that. I used to have this long blonde hair, you know, I'd just like flick it into the air as I walked in rooms. Now I do that and everyone goes, is your neck okay? But I got talking about my hair and I just my chain of thought just went out. Paul, do you have this issue too? Sometimes? With the hair, remembering hair?
I've got hair here now.
Yeah.
It's moved.
See, we're symbiotic, man. We're like, we've got to stick together on these things. But failure is a part of experimentation. And if you talk to most, chefs, they go through a career of actually trying lots of things. I don't know whether or not, if I don't have an ingredient, whether or not the substitution that I use will make it taste the same or make it taste better. So what do? You typically watch them as they walk around their kitchens. They have what in their hand most of the time? A spoon. And they're like, yep, I think that's about right. There's a beer chef that I go to at I make my own beer at home, but I'm not the brains of it. I follow the recipe. There's a master brewer that I go to give me a recipe, and I can literally take him a beer from here, give it to him, and he will sit there and just go, and he'll write the recipe down, and lo and behold, it tastes exactly like that beer. So they develop the palate, they develop the skills behind that. And that came from a whole bunch of failure that lined up behind that. And I've made some bad beer. I can tell you that there's nothing sadder than to take a keg of beer and have to pour it out. There's almost like it's a funeral in some regards. You know, you put on dark clothes and go to that, you know. But what we're trying to do is create, in most regards, so I threw away, yeah, that's not safe to fail, is it? But, you know, I'm looking to go create a safe to fail environment. If I have to throw out, 5 gallons worth of beer, it's not that big of an investment on my part. It was some of my time. I did no other than some mental harm, lightly. But it really is, the goal of when we're doing these experiments is to minimize harm, maximize learning, and we're looking for the emergence that's coming out of things. One of the things that when you're doing lots of testing, one of the things I always tell people is that, you know what I find the most fascinating about our work? Defects. Aren't they cool? You guys didn't really laugh. I think they're incredibly cool. At Intel Corporation, we would spend millions of dollars trying to catch these little boogers. We'll find them, and then one escapes after it went through multiple layers of tests and validation and everything that we can possibly do. This one gets out, and everyone goes, oh, it went out. And I'm like, cool. Let's go look at it. How did it get out? How did it escape us? A lot of things are emergent in the things that we do. One of the things that we should never give a bad name is one of our work products. And one of our work products is defects. We should love them. We should swap war stories about the biggest ones we had. Mine that I caught saved $1 billion. The one that got away cost us $2 billion. So that's totally erased where we were trying to go with it. But still, there's a set of emergence that we have to go look for as we go through. Safe to fail. Is that safe to fail? Is it? Yes or no? No. It's innovative. Give him that. Safe to fail. I had multiple of these that I was going to show, but one thing I found is, why was it only guys that were coming up in these pictures? That was one thing I just, looked through. I'm just like digging through. I've got to make sure that I'm well representing both sides and find other, nope, just dudes. Dudes doing stupid things. Come on. But creating safe to fail environments itself, there are some things that we have to wrap around into it. And that is, if you ever look, that's interesting because I've saw some pictures online of shooting things at a particular angle. The art of giving presentation is to represent an angle, either through words or through pictures, and we don't show the safety nets that might have existed when we were actually doing the work itself. But in the case of what we're trying to do when we create safe to fail experimentation, we are in fact, one, trying something new. In your work today, you should probably ask that question. Is this something new? Do you allow something new to happen? Meaning, when somebody says, I have an idea, why don't we try this? Are those people immediately shot down? Does that happen in your environment? Yeah? Do you ever share a new idea after that? Probably not. I'm not equating humans to dogs. By no means, I'm not saying that, but there was an experiment that showed that, and I didn't like the experiment because I'm a dog owner. You saw, Sagittarius right there in the front. But what they did in this experiment is they had a dog with a leash, and if the dog went outside of a boundary condition, they gave it a small shock. And they did that several times, and then they removed the leash. and they tried to call the dog over. The dog wouldn't come past the boundary condition. So they started upping the ante about how do we get the dog to come over. And they couldn't. They eventually had to try to drag the dog across that line because the psychological damage was so bad with the shock that it actually took close to, I think, 60 times of comforting the dog for them to go through. And I think humans have this same thing inside of us. You tell me no several times, and I start to think I'm pushing ropes. Why should I continue to push that rope when I could get shot down or publicly humiliated because of having that idea? So part of safe to fail experimentation is having something new and everyone in the group saying, yeah, let's give it a shot. Let's see how it goes. Most safe to fail experiments are about 1 day's worth of work. Approximate. I always set up my experiments where it's like we're going to look at the next day and say, how did the experiment go? And if the experiment is going well, we amplify it. Yes, it looks good. Let's go now and amplify that up. Or we dampen it. Doesn't look like it's being as successful as we thought. Let's go ahead and stop. So it's very important when you set these things up that we are actually looking at the fact that what's our tripwire that we're looking at? What probe, and nothing, you're all testers. You guys know how to go write a test, right? We're just going to put a test to see whether or not we established either a winning boundary or potentially diminishing returns. We put a probe into the work itself. That way we can measure it. We can measure it both quantitatively as well as quantitative and, what's the other word? Qualitative, yes. Which somebody told me the hard data and the soft fuzzy stuff. We're going to put both of those around there. Wrap it around in our work, and then we're going to harvest knowledge without blame. This sometimes is incredibly hard. How many people think that you're working in a blame culture? Oh, I'm sorry. Why do you feel that, if I might ask? If you feel comfortable answering it.
I would say, yeah, if you've been in this situation where you've made a suggestion.
Oh, here we go. Yep. Yeah. Hello, testing, 1, 2, 3. Mic on, please. Oh, there we go.
Okay, yeah. So I've done what you suggested, made a suggestion for an idea, and not only did it get shot down, but like years later, somebody's still bringing it up, you know?
Wow. That is, I'm sorry. I'll give you a hug later, because that is.
Thank you, but not in the cave, please.
No. It's free, come on. It's awesome. He wasn't a plant in the audience here. We didn't practice this beforehand, just letting everyone know. But if you see that, you know, if someone gets blamed on something, one, they're going to probably hide the data. But if you continue to bring it up, what's the job satisfaction going to be years later? You know, that's something about, remember the time that you blew up X and Y? I can tell you a story of one thing that we did one time. We had this CPU defect that we were trying to track down, and I was the unit owner, and I had one of the test engineers join me in my cubicle because all of the lab space was full up. And so we set up the board, we put the board down, and we go, oh, we need an oscilloscope. Okay, well, we willed an oscilloscope in my little cubicle. We plugged it in, we started probing around. We need a signal injector. And so we went to the lab, got a signal injector, and plugged it into this little power strip that I had underneath. Well, we ran out of power strips. So we said, okay, well, you know what we really need? We need a logic analyzer. And at the time in the 1980s, these logic analyzers by Tech were really big. And so we had all of this equipment that we've wheeled into my little office. And we plugged that thing in, and we hit the power button, and the lights went off on the floor. And everyone goes, hey, cubicles, you ever heard the term prairie dogging? A prairie dog? Hey, and hey. And we stood up and went, hey. Now, actually, we admitted to what we did. We didn't know that there was a 15-amp limit on that thing. We didn't know we took down the entire floor. And I could tell you, the only time it was brought up was in jest, meaning that, remember the time? No. But no, I got a stellar review that year. It never was held against me. We have to make sure that we protect that with teams. One way that you could probably embrace this, and this is something I did with one of my teams, this is the failure wall. And the failure wall was right when you go into the team area, there was this wall where people went up and they documented their failures. And they put them up onto the wall. We had a ritual with it where people, got put up there. And then when new employees started, this is the first wall that they see coming into the work area. What do you think that having a wall of failure with all of these documented issues that we created, how do you think that made the new employee feel? We got a thumbs up over here. It generated another thumbs up over there. The rest of you, any thumb down? No? All thumbs up? Awesome. You could tell I like to connect with the audience. This isn't a Zoom meeting, guys. Gotta hear the noise, So what it said to them, and by the way, some of the stories were from vice presidents, people who had now become vice presidents that used to be engineers. They can walk up to it and look at it and they go, oh, this person is human. And my CEO, when they finally left, this was Paul Otellini when he left Intel. The guy was relatively quiet as a CEO. And I remember him standing on the stage one time saying, let me tell you how I lost the CPU deal with Apple. And he sits up there and he tells this story. There's a little bit of tears coming out of his eyes. Apparently what he said is that Steve Jobs, get those confused, and I know the ghost of Steve is going to come get me tonight. But Steve Jobs basically said, I want the CPUs for this cost, and Paul Otellini got up from the table and walked out of the room. What wasn't a very professional move on his part. And right after that, then they started looking at other chip manufacturers for the iPhone, the first generation. How much money do you think Intel lost on that? I cannot say the number because I know that lawyer is right over there in the back of the room. But it was quite a sum of money by just, not doing that. And then one of the things that I nudged the person next to me, because this was his retirement speech that he was giving, I said, oh my, he's human. I didn't know it until that moment that person was actually human. It pays for leaders, it pays for all levels of the organization to share those stories off, because at the bottom of this, what does it become? It becomes wisdom. And that wisdom is what we use in order to grow our companies. And that becomes incredibly important to us. Go a little bit further is, if you haven't failed today, maybe you should have a conversation about that. So what do we do in Scrum? We say what in the retrospectives? What went well? What didn't go so well, right? Do we spend enough time talking about what didn't go so well, or is that blank? If it's blank, any Scrum Masters in the room? Raise your hands. Oh, look at you guys. We should have a beer a little bit later, because that's a hard job. I get it. But if you've got that thing, nothing on that list, you might want to dig a little bit deeper and try to understand why is that the case. Maybe we need to up our failure rate. One of the dysfunctions I see in Scrum is we have to always deliver to 100% to the commitment. And I see people working nights and weekends and other things in order trying to go make up the time, when in reality is the failure was we did poor planning. Why are we taking it out on people's skin because we were poor planners? We failed at planning. Be comfortable with saying that. And work on it. Start to go expand your toolkit. Start to go look at the different things that you can go do to go fix these things. Managers. Managers in the room, raise your hands. Oh, come on. It's only you? Oh, there you go. Be proud. It's okay. There, yes. It's a tough job. Management isn't. See? You know, we did this thing at the big Agile conference. We did this thing where someone says, well, the big problem is middle management. And I said, oh, that's an interesting thing. And we did an exercise where we drew a box and we said, put the manager in the middle. And then we said, what's that person's, who's yelling at this person from on top? And they wrote all of the different concerns that the manager has to do. And then we said, what about the employees? What are they demanding of this person? And they wrote a bunch of things that the person had to go do for their employees. And then how are the peers coming at that individual? With the goal of creating empathy for you. So just want to let you know, yes. So at least the people at the Agile conference had empathy for you. These people, not so much. We're going to have to work on them a little bit. But the point is that when people are needing help, sometimes the toolkit that we pick on as managers is the most insensitive toolkit that we can go grab, like a pizza party. I think pizza parties are great, but just don't do it when everyone is basically, we used to have what were called dungeon sessions. Dungeon sessions. What image comes to your mind with dungeons? It's going to be a lovely color on the wall, soft, fluffy couches. No, it's going to be Iron Maidens and chains and has anyone been indentured to one of these dungeons before? And now they disguised it also as like tiger teams. Now that sounds cool. I'm a part of a tiger team. Goodbye, weekend. See yas. You know, we have to be very conscious when we look at, especially in safe-to-fail experimentation, when is the person drowning? And what interventions do we go use as managers to go be able to know that? As a person who's been running, I've had close to 2,000 people working for me at one particular point in my career. My go-to people, because we were fully an Agile organization at the time we had these 2,000 people, were my Scrum masters. I call them Scrum leads. Master is I don't like that word. But my Scrum leads, I would meet with them daily and say, hey, what are the impediments? What are we dealing with? And we would start to sense and detect these things. There's a lean term called go to the gemba. Have you heard of this? Go to the place where the work is. You know, the Japanese word is the place of work. And ask questions. When I used to go on business trips for work, back when we used to have business trips, remember then? That I would arrive a day early unannounced, and I would just go through the work environment. Just to go and look and just see what work was going on. Ask questions. And I know about midday, suddenly somebody would run up to me really fast and go, we didn't know you were here. We're going to get some presentations together for you, get some PowerPoint going for you. PowerPoint, yay! I flew all this way to Europe for PowerPoint. It better be tasty PowerPoint. But they were very concerned that I was there. when the first time I took over these teams. And I thought that was a sign of the fact that people were fearful, that they didn't want unvarnished things going in front of the leader. And now that I knew what the teams were doing at the team level, when those presentations were being given to me, I would start asking pointed questions about the people within the teams. You know? I had one person said that Kanban wouldn't work. And a funny thing about that story is that when I was looking across the environment when I first came in, there was this huge Kanban board in this one work area. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful Kanban board. Do you guys get excited about Kanban boards? Oh, jeez. Well, I got excited about this Kanban board. And I asked one of the person who was sitting there, I said, could you tell me what this is? Naively. Oh, it's our Kanban board. And then they talked about all the stuff that they do with it. And he says, but our manager told us to stop using it. I go, really? Yeah, we stopped using it a few weeks ago because our manager said don't use it. Okay. So in one of those meetings, we started talking about Agile and Agile practices methods. And I talked about how much I loved Kanban. It wasn't in my slides to start with, but it was in my slides for when I was talking about how great I love Kanban. And the manager goes, we do too. That exact manager. We want to implement it too, Ray, because you like it. And I said, nah, you shouldn't go implement it. And he's like, what? What do you mean? It sounds very cool. I said, let me guess where your office is at, because I had not seen where his office was. I said, when you come into work in the morning, you go left, and your office is somewhere the left from the door, because there was only one way into this place. And he said, yeah, how did you know that? I said, because if you went right, there would be a big, beautiful Kanban board in your face that you should go take a look at. And go talk to this individual because it's really cool. And he did. And I think he started to embrace a little bit about the things that were in the business. Positiveness matters. If you guys get a chance to go up on YouTube, look up Benjamin Zannard. And he is just the epitome of just, man, he just, go watch him. Trust me on this. You're nodding your head going, yeah, you've seen him. He has this philosophy that he says that the word failure is a very bad word because if you say the word, I failed, everyone say it, I failed. Boy, you sound so happy with that. I failed. No, but when you say I failed, there's sort of a compression that happens. Your blood shifts around in your body. You feel nervous. He has the strong belief that when you have a failure, you say, you've watched his videos. How fascinating. He will yell that. How fascinating. Let's try it again. And he's an orchestra leader. Someone makes a mistake and he'll go, fascinating. Let's go again. And he is coaching and mentoring people because he thinks fascinating is sort of like, it kind of cheers you up. Your work, say it. How fascinating. How fascinating. See, some hands even went up with that. It's uncontrollable. Go watch him. What happens with that is that the attitude towards problems and failure changes. If you look at highly negative environments, you're going to hide problems. People don't want to get beat up and chewed out because they had an issue. They will hide stuff from you. You want to have an environment where people find you approachable. And what do you do as testers most of the time? What are you delivering the great news? Most of the time? Hey, I found one of those cool defects. You want to go see it? Oh my goodness, look at this thing. It got past all of us. This is great. no, this is like everyone goes, oh, they're in the room again. What's the bug count today? Can we do the bug scrub again? What's with the bug scrubs, by the way? Sort the bugs again, sort them again. How about we just fix the bugs? That'd probably be a better one than just sorting the bugs. That's at least my impression of those. But the fact is that when you develop a positive relationship with your developers, one of the things I find is changes with it is I would have developers come up to me and they would go, there used to be this one guy, he was about this tall. I love the guy. Because I'd be like working on something, you know, putting up a test bed or something, and he'd walk behind me and he'd go, have you checked the JUnit? And I go, no, not yet. You should. And he would literally, I think there was curtain, he would go back into the foliage afterwards. But we had developed such a good working relationship between there that there was this open and honest, go look here. And sure enough, what did we find? We found more defects in those units. But that was because, as a test team, we started keeping a much more positive view on what it is we were delivering to the value of the business. The value we produce is, yeah, it's good, ship it, and not so much. But let's work through those things. Let's go work them through. When it comes back and kind of circling around in Agile adoption space, Agile adoptions are not really theoretically, we're not doing that much with it. We're changing behaviors of people. And those behaviors that we're changing from is processes and tools, comprehensive documentation, contract negotiation, and following a plan. We're merely giving a higher degree of priority to people talking and interacting. The rituals that are constructed, believe it or not, as uncomfortable as it is about to get people talking and to get conversations going between teams. Working solutions. And you notice I took the word software out of there because Agile is way past software. I've got a team that's using it for brand marketing. You know, they do hotels and brand experiences. Unlike the hotel I'm currently at, no offense, I've got put into a hotel that is incredibly hot in the inside. Do not know why it is. Do you guys like your temperatures like about, I don't know, volcano hot in your houses? Because that's what it is in my room. But you know, they use it for going and constructing brand value, so they look at it from a solutions perspective. The other one is customer collaboration. Talking with the customers, getting together with them and having those conversations to say, are we building the right product? I used to have customers that used to sneak in feature requests as defects, right? There's a big nod there because they couldn't get it through one door, and so the only way that they thought they can get the feature is sneaking in as a defect. That says that there's something broken in our customer collaboration. We should be able to entertain those things. And then lastly is just the responding to change. Those are the things I look for. And if you look at the stuff that we do with the Spotify model, or we look at with any model that we're trying to go off and implement, even though Spotify model, for the ones who are doing it, are you doing it well? The ones, we had a couple that said they're doing Spotify model. Are they still in the room? Are you asleep? Individual interactions, people. Spotify model, hand up. Or you're not going to actually admit to it now. There were 4 hands up in the beginning of this presentation. I'll find you. I will. I think it looks, yeah, over there, I see you. And yeah, I see you over there now too. We'll have a conversation. But the goal is you know, we really need to up the ante on being an experimenting culture within our companies. If you're not good at collaboration, experiment with it. If you're not good at defect discovery, experiment with it. If you find a method that you adopted from somebody else, don't just adopt it like you're going to just put it fully into your system. Be the chef. Taste it. Scrum. No, not so much for this project. Not the best thing to go implement. Maybe Kanban will work better. Maybe some other Scrumban, some other methodology that you might go do. Experiment with those things. And do not be afraid to stop doing things. I heard it. It's like the Gong Show. Gong, get off the stage. It was my last slide, by the way, just to my defense. And then lastly, don't be the cargo cult. Go and just embrace the fact that if you feel like you're just going through the rituals and you're not understanding why you're doing the rituals, have those discussions with your people. And I think that's going to really improve your business performance and improve overall just your happiness at work. Because I think it is going to be something that you'll probably look back on and say, how? Fascinating. Fascinating. Exactly. Thank you all.
Thank you ever so much, Ray. Fantastic. Okay. I've got to say that the most popular question isn't a question at all. It's best presentation of the day. Congratulations. Whoa, cool, hey?
It's been bottled up. This is not on. Hello? Hello? Yeah. Testing. 1, 2, 3. It's on. This has been bottled up for 3 years. I've been wanting to get in front of a group of people and go, hi, people. This is great. So thank you.
So I got a real question now.
Okay.
Sorry, you're not going to escape. Usually, people are joking about working in Agile. Really means they're still working in Waterfall, but using Jira. In your experience, how true or common is that?
Do we all remember when Jira was just a bug tracker?
Yes, it still is.
Yeah. Whoever thought that they put the grasshopper thing in the... Anyway. So Scrum Falls, Fragile, Wagile can go down the list. My assessment of Agile teams starts with the 12 principles. And I ask the question, is that principle easy or hard or impossible for us to do? Example, one of the Agile principles is the business and the developers working together daily. Does that happen? And what typically occurs is that if you go down that list, you'll discover that you're not being agile because you're not embracing the principles that are underneath of it. Because if you were embracing the principles, you would be finding every way possible to not let the tool get in your way. And if you go, look, what does it say in the Agile principles? What's the opposite to the tools? Conversations, people talking. And we are so convenient about, and I'm just going to, just to cap this really quick, is that out of sight, out of mind. We put things into a defect tracker, we put things into, and they disappear. And I don't know about you, if you guys have this going on, we would have defect bankruptcy, where everything that was medium and low priority, we would close them, and we would fix the documentation to say works as intended. Those are great customer conversations, by the way, to tell them that their defect is not going to be fixed. But anyway, it's a symptom that you haven't really crossed through using the values and principles effectively, is my view on it.
Okay, next. Are there elements of the Spotify model that you have successfully adopted, for example, chapters? That could be a yes or no answer, couldn't it?
Oh, you just want me to give a yes or no?
No, I'm just saying it's possibly a yes or no.
Yes. No, actually, so I think the one that actually worked out the most was guilds. So something about getting a guild of people together with certain disciplines and driving conversations across big companies. So what we would have is these silos of information in these different areas. Being able to get the people together and actually to talk about how we approach work, I think that worked very well. And in certain aspects, some of the other aspects of the model does work. It just didn't scale.
Cool. Okay. Next. What should we do if the transformation has been done, but the old system was more effective than the new one? I don't know where that's come from, but I like it.
That's a person who really longs for the old days. That long blonde hair that I used to have. Getting my surfboard out, you know, for sure, man. Gonna go out there and get that tasty wave. Yeah, if it isn't working well, then yes, there is some honest questions to look at your retrospectives to see what's going on there. My guess is there's either one or two things that are going on there, which is, number one, you're probably not as agile as you think you are. You might have implemented some of the rituals, but you might have cargo culted it. So I would go and dig in and look in at that to see what might be there. As far as punting back to the old way, do you want to survive as a company? That's probably the best I could tell you. It's because companies who institutionalize waterfall thinking, not Winston Royce thinking. Do you guys know Winston Royce? He wrote the waterfall standard. You know what he says in there? Page 2 or 3, if you actually read it. Do not make big, long phase gates. Clear as anything, he tells you, don't do it as you're practicing it. So we don't even practice waterfall the way the guy who wrote the standard did it. Meaning, you want to inspect and adapt often within that. So if you want an excuse to go back to your old ways, well, don't work on the problem. By the way, there's one other term that I use all the time, and my team hates me for this. I will always ask the question, are we admiring the problem versus getting to solution? Because I find that we as engineers, boy, we like to admire the problems quite a bit versus getting to that experiment that we can go run to go see if we can move the ball forward. And no, I didn't do this just to run down the clock, dude.
That's okay. You're not getting away anyway, so. Last question, which has got a simple answer.
Sure.
We heard about the name of the boat, but what's the name of the doggo?
The dog. So Sage, which is short for Sagittarius, and her mom is Cassie, which is Cassiopeia. We used to raise diabetic assistance dogs. Have you heard of these dogs before? So we train them, scent train them so that they can smell low blood sugar. And people who had diabetes, when they went low, they would give us sweat samples, and we would imprint those on the dogs from puppy to when they were older. And then when the blood sugar was low, they would do a ritual to indicate through this. The dogs were primarily used for children because children didn't know how to sense that they were low. Adults can kind of feel it, but children, they would go into diabetic comas. So these dogs become also their companion, giving them a lot more, not just friendship, but also security, because they won't have that nasty little coma come back, which is good. Needless to say, when you raise a lot of puppies, something happens. Can we keep one? So the mom was one of the breeding pair. And then, yes, when we finally decided to stop because we had to give away 12 puppies every year. You know how sad it is to raise puppies for a year and then go, here you go. Goodbye. So yeah, those are the dogs.
That is the longest dog's name I've ever heard. Ray, thank you so much.
Thank you.